Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, March 6th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, the high today will be 62 degrees with a low of 48.5, so it should be a fairly mild day as you head out. On the program today, we are examining the widespread international fallout resulting from the military escalation in the Middle East and how that situation is impacting global stability. We are also diving into the legal proceedings surrounding the Palisades Fire, where the defense strategy involves attempting to hold the fire department accountable for the blaze. We have those stories, plus a look at other important events making waves today. All this and more on today's episode of Alex's News. Stick with us. Good morning. It is Friday, March 6th, 2026. Our top story today is the massive military escalation in the Middle East that has completely reshaped global politics over the last week. Ethan, we are looking at a situation that feels like it is changing by the hour, so where do things stand this morning?
It is an incredibly volatile situation, Grace. Following the massive strikes on February 28th, we are seeing the direct fallout of a region without its longtime leader. The United States and Israel launched two coordinated missions, Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion, which successfully targeted the compound of the supreme leader.
That is a seismic shift for the Iranian government. What do we know about the actual results of those strikes and who was lost in the compound?
According to the Times of Israel and other regional reports, the strikes were what military planners call a decapitation strike. Not only was Ayatollah Ali Khamenei killed, but his family and several high-ranking officials were also at the site. This move was intended to dismantle the leadership of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in one single afternoon.
How are the leaders in Washington and Jerusalem justifying such an aggressive move against a sovereign nation?
President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have characterized the strikes as a preemptive necessity to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. Gulf News reports that their rhetoric looks very similar to the old Iraq War playbook used decades ago. They are using a strategy of shock and awe to force a rapid collapse of the current regime in Tehran.
We knew there would be a response, so what has Iran done to retaliate against those coalition forces?
The retaliation was almost immediate and quite extensive under the name Operation True Promise 4. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched over 170 ballistic missiles and drones at various targets. They specifically went after United States military bases in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates.
Beyond the direct missile strikes, we are hearing some very concerning reports about the Strait of Hormuz being blocked. Is that still the case today?
It is essentially a de facto blockade right now, which is causing massive anxiety for the global economy. General Sardar Ibrahim Jabari officially declared the waterway closed and threatened to set any passing vessels on fire. ARI News reports that this ban specifically targets ships linked to the United States, Israel, and their Western allies.
If the military has not physically blocked the water with ships, why has the traffic stopped completely?
It mostly comes down to the insurance market making it impossible for commercial companies to operate. Major shipping giants like Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd suspended all their transits once their war risk insurance was canceled. The London P&I Club and Skuld issued 72-hour cancellation notices that took effect just yesterday.
So the risk is simply too high for these companies to even attempt a trip through the Persian Gulf?
Exactly. And there is also a major technical threat that NPR has been tracking very closely. Analysts say there is extensive GPS jamming and AIS spoofing happening all across the region right now. This is creating what they call navigational chaos, making it dangerous for ships to even know where they are.
With the supreme leader dead, who is actually calling the shots inside the Iranian government right now?
There is a massive power vacuum, but an interim leadership council has been formed to manage the crisis. Iran International reports that this group includes President Masoud Pezeshkian and the head of the judiciary. However, they are facing intense pressure from the military wing to appoint the late leader's son, Mojtaba Khamenei,
That sounds like it could lead to even more internal conflict if the public does not want a hereditary successor. Is the Iranian public staying quiet during all of this?
Not at all, as the country seems to be on the verge of a potential civil war. Anti-regime protests that started late last year have intensified, leading to violent clashes in the streets of major cities. We are seeing reports of pro-regime factions fighting with citizens who are actually celebrating the recent strikes.
Looking at our own government, there seems to be a lot of friction in the cabinet regarding how this war is being handled. What is the latest from the White House?
There is a visible rift forming between the Secretary of State and the Defense Secretary. The Washington Post reports that Secretary Marco Rubio is framing this as a forced response to an imminent Israeli strike. Meanwhile, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is calling it a decisive mission to destroy all Iranian missile threats once and for all.
Did we not see a major leadership change yesterday, involving the Department of Homeland Security as well?
Yes, President Trump abruptly replaced Kristi Noem as the Secretary of Homeland Security just yesterday. This move comes as the administration tries to tighten its grip on domestic security while the conflict expands abroad. It seems the president is looking for a specific type of loyalty as the geopolitical stakes get higher.
What about the legislative branch? Is there any effort in Congress to slow down this military campaign?
There was a bipartisan attempt to pass a war powers resolution this week to rein in the administration's actions. According to official Senate records, the resolution failed in both houses by a very narrow margin. The vote in the House was 212 to 219, showing just how divided the country is.
It is not just the United States facing political drama. As I understand, Prime Minister Netanyahu is also in a tough spot. Is his government at risk of falling apart?
His coalition is essentially crumbling because of internal disputes over the state budget and military draft exemptions. The Times of Israel reports that if a budget is not passed by the end of March, elections will trigger automatically. This domestic pressure is happening at the same time he is managing a multi-front war against Iran and Hezbollah.
We are also seeing some tension with our allies in the United Kingdom over the use of their military bases. What happened there?
Prime Minister Keir Starmer found himself in a heated row with President Trump over base usage for offensive strikes. Senior British ministers actually blocked the United States from using RAF Fairford for the initial bombing runs. This led to the president saying that Starmer had ruined the special relationship between our two countries.
Did the British government eventually offer any support to the coalition after that initial refusal?
They did reach a compromise where Starmer authorized the use of bases specifically for defensive drone interceptions. It was a middle ground meant to support the alliance without getting fully dragged into the offensive campaign. However, the political damage between London and Washington seems to be done for the time being.
Moving to the situation in Asia, South Korea seems to be taking some very drastic steps to protect their interests. How is the war affecting them?
The economic impact was immediate, with the South Korean stock market falling over 1% this morning. As oil prices surged toward $100 per barrel, President Lee Jae-myung has ordered a strict price cap. He is trying to prevent any price gouging as the country enters an emergency survival mode.
I understand there is also a massive rescue operation underway for their citizens who are stranded in the Middle East. How many people are we talking about?
There were approximately 3,000 South Koreans stranded in the United Arab Emirates because the airspace was closed. 2 flights did manage to bring about 372 passengers back to Incheon on Friday morning. The government is now preparing to send military transport aircraft to retrieve the rest of their citizens.
Is South Korea still maintaining a presence inside Iran itself, despite the ongoing bombing campaign?
There are 40 citizens still in Iran, but a level 4 travel ban has now been imposed. This is the highest tier of travel warning the government can issue to its people. They are working around the clock to ensure every South Korean is accounted for and moved to safety.
In a surprising turn of events, it seems South Korea is using this global chaos to push for peace on their own peninsula. What is this new declaration they announced?
The Unification Ministry announced today that they are pursuing a 4-party peace declaration to end the Korean War. President Lee Jae-myung said, quote, "This is a matter of survival for our people," end quote. He believes that stabilizing the Korean peninsula is essential, while the rest of the world is distracted by the Middle East.
That would be a historic move if they can actually get the United States and China to agree to it right now. Finally, what can you tell us about the humanitarian situation on the ground in the conflict zone?
The human cost is becoming truly devastating as the fighting spreads into civilian areas. The Straits Times reports that a missile strike on a school in Manab, Iran, killed nearly 170 people. This tragedy has drawn international condemnation, even from some of the allies of the coalition.
And the situation in Lebanon seems to be getting worse as well, is that correct?
It is a massive crisis, with over 300,000 civilians fleeing their homes in Lebanon. Israel has expanded its strikes against Hezbollah targets, which has displaced huge portions of the population. The United Nations is currently deadlocked because Russia and China are calling these campaigns a violation of international law.
It sounds like we are watching a total realignment of the global order in real time. Ethan, thank you for that extensive update on a very difficult morning.
Of course, Grace. We will keep monitoring the situation as it develops.
Good morning. We are starting today, March 6, 2026, with a major update on the massive legal battle over the Palisades Fire. A former Uber driver is fighting for his freedom this morning as his lawyers move for his immediate release from federal custody. Chloe, this is a huge turn of events for a case that has gripped Southern California for over a year.
It really is, Grace. Attorneys for 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht are arguing that their client is being used as a scapegoat for government failures. They filed a motion claiming that newly uncovered evidence shows institutional negligence by the Los Angeles Fire Department. They believe this negligence is the real reason a small brush fire turned into a catastrophic inferno.
The defense is essentially trying to pin the blame on the very people who were supposed to put the fire out.
That is exactly their strategy. According to reports from ABC News, the entire case hinges on the connection between two separate fires from January of last year. The first was the Lachman Fire, which broke out on New Year's Day in the Pacific Palisades. Firefighters thought they had that 8-acre blaze totally extinguished by the 2nd of January.
But then just 6 days later, a massive fire erupted in that exact same area during some really fierce weather.
That second blaze became the deadly Palisades Fire, which claimed 12 lives and destroyed more than 6,800 structures. Federal prosecutors are now using what they call a zombie fire theory to link Rinderknecht to the tragedy. They allege he started the first fire, which then smoldered underground for a week before reigniting.
It is a terrifying concept to think a fire can just live under the surface like that for an entire week.
It is actually a phenomenon that fire investigators have seen before in areas with very thick brush. U.S. News and World Report explains that heat can hide in root systems where there is very little oxygen. It just waits for a fresh breeze to give it enough energy to break back through to the surface.
And that is why the testimony from the veteran firefighter is so incredibly damaging to the prosecution's case.
It really changes the narrative, because Scott Pike is not just any witness, he is a 23-year veteran of the department. During a news conference yesterday, the defense revealed Pike's testimony from a separate civil lawsuit. He testified that he saw at least 5 active hotspots where the ground was still smoking.
What specifically did he see on the day the crews were ordered to leave the scene?
Pike said he found ash pits that were still filled with red-hot coals, even as they were clearing out. He claims he warned his supervisors about the danger, but his concerns were reportedly blown off. This testimony directly contradicts the official accounts given by the fire department leadership after the disaster.
Is there anyone else who can back up his story about the fire still being active during that time?
Yes, a California state park ranger named Christy Araujo has corroborated the presence of a smoldering burn scar. The Associated Press reports that her observations were made in the days following the initial fire. This really undermines the battalion chief, who testified that he walked the perimeter 4 times to ensure it was out.
It sounds like the fire department is starting to take these internal contradictions pretty seriously now.
They definitely are. LAFD Chief Jamie Moore has expressed some major concerns about those conflicting accounts in recent days. He has actually commissioned the Fire Safety Research Institute to do an independent report on how they handled the Lockman fire. This investigation will look at whether the department followed proper protocols before declaring the fire out.
I also understand there are some pretty shocking claims about environmental regulations actually making the firefighting efforts harder.
It sounds almost unbelievable, but CBS News is reporting that state parks officials allegedly restricted the use of heavy machinery. They were worried about protected native plants, so they reportedly blocked bulldozers and chainsaws while the fire was spreading. This allegedly prevented crews from creating the deep containment lines needed to stop a fire.
And didn't the defense mention something about firefighters being told to hide their work from the public?
That is one of the more bizarre details coming out of these new court documents. LAist reports that crews were told to fill in their containment lines with loose brush. They apparently did this so hikers would not mistake the fire breaks for new trails. The defense argues this move effectively refueled the fire line and gave the embers more wood to burn.
Despite all these allegations against the state, the prosecution still says they have the right man because of his phone data.
They have what they are calling a trail of digital breadcrumbs that points directly to him. According to the Los Angeles Times, Uber and iPhone GPS data placed Rinderknecht within 30 feet of the fire's origin. This was at the Hidden Buddha clearing just after midnight on New Year's Day.
This is also becoming a landmark case for the use of artificial intelligence as evidence in a criminal trial, right?
It really is. PC Mag reports that prosecutors have access to Rinderknecht's ChatGPT history from months before the blaze. He was apparently using the AI to generate very detailed images of burning forests, which the government sees as premeditation. This is one of the first times we have seen AI history used to prove intent in a case this big.
But there was also a specific question he asked the AI while the fire was actually happening.
This is the piece of evidence that seems most damaging for the defense team right now. While he was calling 911 to report the blaze, he allegedly asked the AI a very specific question. The prosecution says he asked the chatbot, quote, "Are you at fault if a fire is lit because of your cigarettes?" End quote.
That sounds like a very incriminating thing to ask while a forest is burning down right in front of you.
It certainly looks that way to a jury, which is why his lawyers are so focused on the fire department's mistakes. The defense is trying to shift the focus from the start of the fire to the failure to contain it. They want to show that even if he was negligent, the government was even more so.
Don't people usually have some privacy protections when it comes to their personal search histories and AI chats?
That is the big legal debate that will likely reach the higher courts eventually. PC Mag notes that a recent federal ruling established that AI logs are not actually protected by privacy privileges. The court basically said users have no reasonable expectation of confidentiality when they are talking to a third-party tool.
I imagine his lawyers are going to try to get that digital evidence thrown out before the trial starts anyway.
They are planning to file a motion to suppress that evidence as early as next week. They are going to argue that the search warrants used to get those logs and GPS coordinates lacked probable cause. If they can get the AI logs thrown out, the prosecution loses their best evidence of his mindset.
Even if he did start that first small fire, how do they defend him against the massive destruction that followed a week later?
That is going to be the central legal battleground of this entire trial. When it starts in April, the defense argues that the fire department's failure to put out the zombie fire is a grossly negligent intervening factor. They say this breaks the chain of legal causation for the 12 deaths and the thousands of homes destroyed.
So the argument is that his actions didn't directly cause the deaths because the fire department had the chance to stop it.
Exactly. They are arguing that the destruction of Malibu and the Palisades was a result of administrative failure, not a single cigarette. If the jury disagrees and he is convicted on all charges, Rinderknecht could face up to 45 years in prison. He has already been in custody for 150 days while this has all been playing out.
When can we expect this to actually go before a jury for a final decision?
We have a pretrial conference scheduled for next month, but the full trial is set to begin on April 21st. For now, the U.S. Attorney's Office is staying quiet and only says they will see the defendant in court. We will have to wait and see if the judge decides to release him before then.
This is a complex story with so many lives impacted by that disaster. Thanks for the update, Chloe. Here are some other headlines. The United States Postal Service is warning that it may soon be reaching the end of the line. Postmaster General David Steiner, who took the helm in July 2025, told the Associated Press that the agency will completely run out of cash by February 2027 unless Congress decides to deliver some relief. Steiner is looking to lift a $15 billion borrowing cap to keep the mail moving. To help lick the problem, the service has hired the consulting firm Alvarez & Marsal for some structural soul-searching. They are also looking for the authority to hike first-class stamp prices to 95 cents. Steiner is scheduled to testify before the House on March 17th to argue that current statutory constraints are, first class, outdated, and burdensome for an agency supporting over 640,000 employees. In legal news, California is leading a pack of 24 states to tell the federal government that its new trade policy is, borderline, illegal. This coalition, which includes New York, Oregon, and Arizona, filed a lawsuit on March 5th to block newly imposed global tariffs. The states argue the administration is trying to bypass a February 20th Supreme Court ruling by using Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta called the 15% import taxes an illegal cash grab that could cost the average American family $1,750 annually. The White House, however, says the move is a necessary tool to address serious balance of payments deficits. Across the Pacific, China is lowering the bar to reach new heights. At the National People's Congress, Premier Li Qiang unveiled a draft for the 15th five-year plan, setting a growth target of 4.5 to 5%. That is the lowest target since 1991, as the Dragon pivots toward high-quality development over raw expansion. The blueprint calls for technological self-reliance in artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and 6G, supported by a 7% annual boost in research and development spending. They are also aiming for a 17% reduction in carbon intensity by 2030, while simultaneously raising the defense budget by 7%. Meanwhile, Indonesia is telling its youth to log off and get real. Communication and Digital Affairs Minister Mutia Hafid announced a national ban on social media for anyone under the age of 16. Starting March 28th, accounts on high-risk platforms like TikTok, Instagram, X, and even Roblox will be gradually deactivated. This Instaban aims to tackle a digital emergency involving online exploitation and internet addiction. Indonesia is the first non-Western nation to follow Australia's lead, placing the burden of age verification squarely on the tech giants. Finally, the American labor market is showing a work-in-progress stability. The Department of Labor reported that the economy added 60,000 jobs in February, matching what economists had penned in their forecasts. While hiring has cooled from January's numbers, the unemployment rate held steady at 4.3%. Gains were driven by the healthcare and social assistance sectors, which are nursing, the economy back to health, while manufacturing and federal government roles saw a bit of a downsize. Analysts say frigid winter weather and a strike by thousands of Kaiser Permanente workers in California and Hawaii put a key chill on the final tally. This low-hire, low-fire environment likely means the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates parked in the 3.50 to 3.75% range for now. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.